Monday person, let AJ know in the chat. This is so loud too. Are we ready to get started? We got a minute. Do y'all want your extra minute or do we want to go ahead and get started? Monday says let's go. All right. Monday says let's go. Well, hey, it's 8 o'clock, 4 days into a conference. We're glad that we're here. We are really glad that we're here. And we're glad that you are here too. So AJ and I are so happy to be with y'all this morning. This is our fourth session of this conference out of our new resource, which if you have not yet stopped by and grabbed it, this is it. Some head nods or okay. So in that resource with that overcoming adult learning challenges, we went into 4 different categories. We went into literacy, trauma-informed instruction, learning differences, and then what you see today, skills development. And I'm Jen. I should probably let you know that too. I'm Jen. AJ and I work together at Essential Ed. I get to be in this space where we are doing educational development, which means I get to work with students and I get to work with teachers. And then I get to work with our whole team's internal just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page and speaking the same language. AJ, you want to say hello? Is that all you want to say? Okay. Here, introduce yourself.
So yeah, my name's AJ, and I've been with Essential Ed for about 3.5 years. I cover mainly the middle part of the country. My role is to help teachers and administrators implement our program, do training, do support, onboarding, that kind of whole. We have Essential Ed now what? That kind of question is what I tackle on a regular basis. My background is in teaching students with special needs at a high school setting, and then I moved into adult ed where I had access to Essential Ed in the classroom. And so now I get to work with folks that have Essential Ed in the classroom and tackle those unique problems. So that's what I do. I love getting to work with teachers every day. So that's like my favorite thing. So that's me.
It's a good thing because that's kind of what you do. So if you didn't like it, that would be really rough. So this resource came out of our second professional learning community initiative, which was an opportunity that we extended to educators to come in and just do a deep dive. 2023, it was into retention. And then this past year, it was into those 4 areas that I just mentioned. Christina's been a part of both those groups. So she'll interject with some things every now and then. But as we talk about today's topic, where we want to start is here. What are the fundamental needs of adult learners? Kind of how we got to those 4 things is we kind of just talked about this big umbrella. Let's start talking about all the adult learner needs. And then we were able to kind of categorize those things into those 4 areas. We know that there's more than 4, and we know that the 4 that we talked about for 6 months could be 6-year studies and then some on each of them. So our goal in this resource, our goal in our time together today is just to kind of talk, to have an awareness, to share ideas with each other about these very real needs. And this one for me was one that kind of took me a little bit by surprise, because I think we all have this understanding, we all have this concept. If a student leaves that traditional K-12 environment before that expected graduation time, we often think about content, right? We think about the content that they missed. Oh, well, they didn't have Algebra 1, Algebra 2. They didn't have a full spectrum of English. They didn't have a full spectrum of history. And the truth is, when they make that exit, yes, there's content that's missed, but while there's brain development going on, they're also missing some really key skills. That old adage of everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. I taught kindergarten for a long time, so I like that statement. But those skills that you're developing in kindergarten, then you hopefully develop in first and second and third, and they're taking a different developmental slant each time. So if you make that early exit, there's a lot of things that you're missing along the way. And so we divided those skills into 3 categories. We called them school skills. So these are the skills that are developed while that student is trying to meet those academic goals. And we'll talk about what those are in a second. Class skills. So that's class skills that are developed within a classroom environment, and then life skills, those things that you're doing to pursue that education, but you just don't do them in the confines of the school. You're doing those things at home as a part of that process. So what are those things? The skills learned while studying academic skills help adult students pass tests, gain qualifications, and access better job opportunities. These skills form a foundation for lifelong learning independence, and success. And I think we would all agree that we want all three of those things for our students, right? We want them to be lifelong learners. We want them to have independence. They want to have independence and autonomy. And of course, we want them to be successful at whatever success looks like for them because it's different for everyone. And we want that for our students in both their life and in the workplace. So, what are school skills? And I'm going to give you four, but then we can brainstorm some others. What are school skills? Learning things like organization. If you exit before 18, you're missing out on, whatever number of years of having to get your stuff together and stay organized and stay on top of your homework and all of those things, which involves, of course, then time management. So you're missing out on the growth of that skill. Just the ability to study. Have you ever thought about, did anybody ever teach you how to study? I mean, I think this is a skill. You can chime in here too. I think this is a skill that's probably lacking even if you stayed in that traditional environment. Because I don't know about you, I think it fell into two categories for me. It was either, hey, go study, and you'd push a pile of textbooks, and then it's like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Or this was not my favorite. This is how you study. We're going to do something called Cornell Notes, and you're going to take out a ruler and you're going to draw the line down and you're going to highlight this and you're going to put it in this category. And this is how you study. Well, maybe for you, but that did not work for me. And so our students are often left with just some baggage of maybe even learning a really strict or structured way, or just a way that did not speak to their learning style, or they were kind of left in the dark. Here, just go study. And so those skills were left underdeveloped. And then test prep as a whole. I'd be curious in a K 12 environment for you all, did you learn test prep? Did somebody pull you aside? The only reason I did is because I had diagnosed test anxiety. And the doctor said, you got to do something to get this girl under control. And so my parents sent me to a test prep class where you're learning all those test taking skills that thankfully we get to share with students now, because so much of the GED and high set, and we talk about this all the time at TABE and CASAS, you're learning the skills which you want to apply multiple areas. But one of those skills is how to take a test. I mean, many of you may have had students say, I don't like it. They're just trying to trick me. The questions are confusing. And so I say to those folks, well, let's figure out a way to beat the system. And then let's talk about what those testing skills are. Yeah. Mhm. 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 And I think there's a portion of our students that would probably prefer that. If the test is the gateway, then I think a lot, because we have students tell us that, just tell me what I need to know. Just tell me what I need to know. And the way the test is structured, it's critical thinking skills. You're not going to see the same thing. It's not, a regurgitation of those notes. So it is then those test taking skills. What are the things I need to do to attack this test? What things do I need to look for? And we thankfully have a lot of resources that AJ and I can provide to you. We've got a lot of webinars. And the webinar that I love for, I'm getting on a tangent. The webinar I love for test prep is great because you can use that with your students too. The slides there were written for students. We went through them with educators, but with any of our resources, whenever you access that, you get those slide decks. So feel free to use those with your students, and we'll make sure that you can get some resources for that today. What other things would you say fall into this category of school skills? And AJ, what else would you say falls into this category? Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll talk about that when we go to class skills and those things, because you got school skills, and those are those things that I as a student am trying to figure out how to make this school thing work for me. And with a lot of our students, like a lot of different ways, they are a lot of in a lot of different ways, they didn't have somebody kind of walk alongside them and figure that out because we have 90 million other things to do than to walk alongside each student and say, okay, let's talk about how you're going to take this test. So there are ways to kind of address that universally. So organization, time management, study. Can you think of anything else that a student might miss if they were trying to just get a hold of themselves in a school environment? Yes. 100%. That would definitely go under this category. For those of you online, a participant just shared that students don't know how to take notes. And I think that falls into that category too of I hated that structure of Cornell notes. So I was a flashcard girl. I'd carried them around on one of those little what are those little ring binders? Yeah. So I'd carry them around and I would, look at them back and forth. That doesn't work for everybody. We actually, we don't have it on the educator side. On the ND side, if you all are with Essential Ed and you click into coaching sessions, there's a separate coaching session. And we introduce 5 different ways to take notes. Some of them are visual, some of them are for read write learners, those types of things. But it was never taught. And so I think a lot of our students, they did miss that boat on that. But I think we can say that a lot of us didn't have that ability or have that opportunity to learn how to take notes. I would be curious in that regard, how do you all like to take notes best? Okay, bullet points. Okay. Are you in your pencil to paper? Anybody digital? Okay. Oh, there you go. And then it pops it in there. So you're digital. How do you take notes on your phone or do you? Yeah. Yeah. That's typically how I'm doing it because then I can email them to myself. All that go around. Is anybody saying anything online there, AJ? Mm, mm, mhm,
The other one saying that students very similarly rely on memorization.
mm,
Memorize exactly what they saw on the board.
mhm,
That's how
mhm,
I just take that practice test over and over and over.
mhm. Yeah, I had a young man call when I was on the independent side. He called and he said, I'm running late to my test site and I want to take 3 more lessons before I get there." And I'm like, "Oh, honey, no, 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 no." Because I think he was of the mindset like, this is the best thing I can do for my test prep right now. I can just take some more lessons when I tell students all the time, day before, 2 days before, stop studying. Like you've put in the work. If you've put in the work and you're building those strong critical thinking skills, then you don't need to cram because this is not a test you can cram for. I think a lot of students they think that it's like, how many lessons do I have to do? I've worked with a lot of students that have gone through our program and they've said, well, I've done all the lessons, but I'm still not doing well on the test. And then I'll pull up their profile and they haven't taken a single practice test. And so that's a school skill that we just don't think about. We don't think about that idea of, well, they are used to sitting there maybe and taking lessons, but are then they putting themselves through the paces to take those practice tests? Class skills. So here we're talking about communication. There's that teamwork aspect, that civil discourse that all of us need to learn how to do. Those communication skills, active listening. We talked about the importance of that in so many things as an educator. We have the opportunity then to model that active listening for our students. And then, of course, teamwork, the ability to work within a team, see the things that you bring to the table, recognize the things that other folks bring to the table. Those, dreaded group work. Some people love it. Some people who loved group work. Anybody love group work? Okay. I liked it too. Anybody hate group work? Was it because you ended up doing all the work? Yeah. You're a teacher. That's probably why. Yeah. You showed strong leadership skills early on. What else would fall into this class skills category? So think about the skills when you're in a classroom environment that our students might be missing out on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yep, for sure. AJ, what are we seeing in the chat? Oh, okay. So I'll need to repeat. It's 8 o'clock. I'm still trying to wake up. I know that, but I don't know that right now. So, young lady in the back just shared that it's, flexibility. It's things change up, your schedule changes up, and all of a sudden, how do I pivot? What do I need to do now to stay on track because things don't look the same as what they were supposed to or what I thought they were going to look like? What else? Class skills, things you're doing inside that environment. Social skills. So elaborate on that. What would y'all put into that social skills category? Is it this? Is it, oh my goodness, I'm looking at you in the eyes and we're having a conversation. I'm not looking at you on this and moving my thumbs 95 miles an hour. Yeah, so that's a skill I think that we could all, even as adults and as adult learners, I think we could all amp up. If you are working with Gen Z, that is a constant problem. Folks have learned, they have lived on that screen. And it's one of the reasons why, while they are the most connected generation in theory from a technology standpoint, they are also the most isolated because they don't know or don't have an awareness. No one's come alongside and said, no, 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 put it down and let's have a conversation. Yeah. One of the things somebody asked me, well, what was the life skill that you taught your child before she went off to college? And most people say, "Oh, I taught her how to do the laundry." Well, your kids should have known how to do their own laundry before then. But I taught them how to do the laundry. Mine was, and she hated it. She did it kicking and screaming, and some days she just refused to do it. I made her call and make doctor's appointments. I made her call and set up her salon appointment or nail appointment. And it was like you were asking her to rip off a limb because I was asking her to pick up the phone and she's a smart girl. And she has, lovely, I think, in most ways, communication skills. But that, for whatever reason, can be a really big challenge, especially for that younger group. All right, so let's talk about life skills. So I think yours is a great segue because what she's talking about is something, yes, you learn as a school skill or you learn as a class skill, but that type of flexibility doesn't go away. And we're going to talk about how very important that is because that is a life skill because we need flexibility in the classroom, but we also need flexibility as a life skill. And those life skills that are built up in that K-12 environment, if exited early, include things like motivation. If you have dropped out, if you have left, then you didn't see something through that was kind of a big goal. And that's a big deal. But also think about all the little things that have to get accomplished, all those small little goals along the way that you missed out on the opportunity to set those goals and then check them off your list. And so that motivation can be really waning because you don't have anything to base it on. You don't know what that feels like when you reach that goal. You don't know what that feels like to get that dopamine rush of that incentive. And so it's really easy to have a lot of apathy when it comes to that. Goal setting in general, were you all taught to set goals? Did somebody come alongside you and say, this is how you set goals? Okay, I got some head nods. So, what did that look like for you? How were you taught to set goals? Yes. Oh, yes, that'd be great. Yes, online audience. I'm sorry I'm neglecting you. Here we go.
I was just taught to uh, do my top goal and then figure out how I'm going to get there. Take the little steps and figure out how I'm going to get to the top at home. At home. Hmm.
We can unpack that a little bit too, right? A lot of our students may not have had that home support as well to come along in concert with that school support. Anybody learn goal setting in school? I didn't. I didn't, other than the fact of, hey, you've got a test coming up in 2 weeks. And so then that was like that end point. That was the point that you were running to. But the idea of setting and breaking that up and what that needs to look like, that then goes into that organization and time management. And if you aren't used to being in that mode, like a lot of us aren't, then goal setting is a very foreign thing. And it's why we have to kind of retrain our brains and retrain our students' brains to look at progress over perfection. Because if we just look at the GED, I got to get a 145. I got to get a 145. I got to get a 145. There's so many little teeny tiny steps in there. As you said, kind of when we curriculum map and we backwards map that, it's the equivalent of that. Where do I want to go? But what are all the little teeny tiny steps that are going to help me get there? In our other resource in the retention guide, there's some resources in the back. It's a goal navigation workshop to work with your students and set those goals. I love working with students on goal setting because it's a twofold. You're going to learn so much about your students when you sit down and you ask them what their goals are. And what this worksheet asks you to do is help them set those measurable goals, but also set incentives for themselves. And when you find out what will get a student motivated, then you've got gold in your hand to keep that motivation going. You learn a lot more about why they are in your class in the first place. And if they say, okay, let's set a goal for when you pass your math exam, and they say, "Oh, I want to have a party with my family." If that's their reaction, then their family's a motivator. And so then learning about their family, asking questions about their family is going to be something that is going to draw that relationship connection with you in that. Here's a big one. What about problem solving? Was anybody you walked through a linear map of how to solve a problem? I think this one's super lacking. AJ, did you ever have like any direct instruction on problem solving? I think we were taught how to solve math problems, right? And what did we learn? For the most part, many of us learned there's only one way to do that. Rarely is that the case. There's always at least a different way to look at it, and problem solving is the same way. But what we are facing now is we are facing a generation of people in the last two generations that are not great problem solvers. Now, we could say that it kind of goes a little bit with some resilience trends that we're seeing there. I always think about everybody seen Pretty Woman? Yeah. Well, you might not. You're a baby, so I don't know if you've. I'm talking to that young lady behind you. Yeah. Yes. Pretty Woman. Have you seen that movie? I know younger generations may not have seen it. I know. Younger generation. So I always think about problem solving, and I think about the scene where she goes to the opera and she's got the opera glasses and she picks them up and they don't work, right? They're like slanted to the side. And she's like, these are broken. Mine are broken. These are broken. Mine are broken. And a panic sets in and he just goes, floop, and flips the glasses over, and now all of a sudden they're not broken anymore. I think a lot of students, a lot of people, regardless of your age, something doesn't work the first or second time. This is broken. Mine is broken. Well, let's figure out a way to problem solve that. And what does that look like? And that's a life skill that we can learn within a classroom environment. But if we missed it, we can cultivate it outside of that. What other life skills? I love that you added in adaptability because we're going to go there in just a second.
Thank you. I would say leadership skills, and that came into the before the class one as well, because and that goes with problem solving. Because when you see that, I have this saying. I was sitting with a millionaire 2 weeks ago, and she's like, she told us like, whenever you learn how to solve problems, the fastest you do that, you learn that, you grow. And like you said, it comes to resilience. I mean, I saw that. I have an 18-year-old. I I do. I know. So my son, very very mature, um, but we had a rough life. So it comes into that. However you grew up, and you see that on your students.
I think life skills with a lot of our students is showing up on time, not understanding that coming in 10, 15 minutes late doesn't work. It's, you're disrupting the class. And also, if you're not going to show up, you got to let somebody know. You can't just not show up. And I think that's one of the big ones, a big problem.
And my thing is I hear so many people writing that off, like, oh, that's Gen Z, or oh, that's millennial. and we can make an observation, but then if no one ever comes alongside them and then says, not only, honey, let me explain to you why it's important to show up on time. They are very much a generation that they need the authentic why. They need to understand. And even just in raising younger kids, my husband says, well, they shouldn't have to know why. It's just because I said so. That's not going to work with some of your younger students. They need to know why. They need to have an intrinsic value, for better or worse. They do. So I've kind of taken it. AJ and I were talking last night. I've kind of, in my older years, I've kind of taken like this mama bear role, not just with my kids, but with other people's kids. And I do some volunteer work with my best friend's daughter, who's early 20s, and she has a very flexible job, but she'll roll in about 10 o'clock, and her supervisor, her manager says, you can be flexible, you can work a little bit from home, you can kind of come in, just send me a message, just let me know. And so those kind of things might not occur to them. It's not out of lack of, it's not out of lack of trying to be irresponsible. Somebody may just need to tell them this is what's expected of you. And we can't expect that that's just going to come through osmosis. We may have learned it, X generations may have learned it because we had to figure it out, right? I was the kid that, hey, the key's under the mat, there's hot pockets in the freezer, and there's Capri Suns, figure it out, those types of things. And these younger generations have not been in that position. They've had a lot of things that they've been enabled with. And so when they develop those skills, or when they lack that skill development, we can't just write them off and throw that to the side. They just need somebody to come along and teach that. So that's where this awareness comes in, and these things that might be lacking with some of our students. All right, so what else? Which of these things discussed in any of the categories, school skills, class skills, and what was the other one that I just said? Life skills. Any of these things discussed, which one of them do you see your students at most in need of? We've talked about some. We talked about some organizational components. Yes.
This is amazing. Start your workout on your Fitbit there. No, so two things that folks have put online that I thought were very interesting. One, let's see, was resourcefulness. Oh, emotional regulation was a big one. And I thought, so I've got a kiddo who's in third grade, and I think the last 3 years of education for him has been emotional regulation in the classroom. Like, how do we do this thing next to my best friend who we fight often, and I can't learn if I'm whatever, So emotional regulation, huge component that they probably just miss out on. And then the other one that I thought was really interesting was talking about resourcefulness in terms of life skills. And then someone commented in the chat as well that they see a huge disparity in the resourcefulness of their GED students versus their ESL students. And some of their ESL students come in with a lot more resourcefulness, and they can do that problem solving that their GED students hit the first or second barrier and go, I don't know what to do. So I thought I'd throw those in there.
To that too, that does anybody primarily teach ESL or ESOL? In that there's a different and AJ and I've talked about this as well. There's a different kind of synergy in those groups where there's a power of everybody kind of running toward the same goal. And so part of me says that that's part of why that drive is there, is they've got a community around them for the most part that's pushing. And outside of that scope, that connection is not always there to have that peer-to-peer, hey, accountability running alongside each other. And I think that's where research a lot is showing why while we want, and while there is validity to it, that really, really strong student to teacher relationship being very impactful in the classroom, research is actually showing that the peer-to-peer connection is stronger than that teacher educator to student connection. And it's because of things like that. It's because of, especially younger students, they're already used to a comparison culture. They grew up with it. They grew up on social media. And so there is a little bit of a drive or an influence that they get from their peers that they may not necessarily have in the same way from you. We've talked a little bit about this so far. Which have the most impact? Which of these skills we've already talked about would you say have the most impact on motivation, engagement, and progress? Which of those things stand out to you? What was that? I'm sorry. I think they all kind of work together. I think we could say one is kind of one is a piece of the other. But I keep going back to what this young lady in the back said. That adaptability and flexibility is a superpower, because it goes into problem solving. It goes into what do I do when I've had an organizational plan and now I need to shift it. It goes into, well, I had my time managed and now I don't because things shifted on me. And what we are seeing with these skills is some of these skills that our students are missing out on in school, in class, and in life are some of the top employability skills. We do a lot of, we have some crossover programs where we're working with work skill development and digital literacy development. And so we talk to folks a lot about, okay, what are employers looking for? Because employment tends to, we tend to have shifts at industry that then affect education. And we are in a really, really cool time right now where industry is telling us and setting a new tone for success in, hey, you don't necessarily have to have a 4-year degree, lo and behold, to come in and work for us and be successful. But we want you to have skills. And a lot of folks say, oh, well, everything's going AI and they're just figuring out how to do all these things. The interesting thing, though, is the more that we start to lean in technology and we lean into artificial intelligence, right now, the top employability skill is emotional intelligence. So we're moving that direction in the tools that artificial intelligence can apply. But our employers, our industry are saying, no, we need people to come in with these emotional intelligence skills. So under communication, that's how we would break that down. So top skills, usually communication, but it has all these different derivatives of it. Emotional intelligence, teamwork, and leadership, like the young lady that, as she mentioned, all of those things go into communication. You can't lead people if you can't get along with them. You could, but you can't lead people well if you can't get along with them. And that's that communication. The other top probability, or excuse me, I'm looking at probability on my computer. The other top employability skill are those problem solving skills. And that's critical thinking and creativity, curiosity, and a lot of other sessions for different topics all across the board. I've heard, let's be curious people. Let's be curious teachers. Let's instill curiosity in our students. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Management, that would go into problem solving skills. Management, looking at, okay, how am I going to solve this puzzle of all of these pieces going around? If I do want to be a leader, if I am leading this group project, what does that look like to manage this? So that kind of falls under that umbrella. Self-awareness, huge lacking skill in just human beings and culture in general. We don't like it, do we? I mean, I don't know about you. Do you like to go through your day and say, okay, what were the things that I did really well today? We might like that. Oh yeah, I knocked it out of the park with this, or I had this great interaction. But very rarely, unless you're me, who plays back everything that has gone wrong in the course of the day through my head, then we don't like to look and say, okay, maybe these things went wrong, but where am I held accountable in that? What role did I play in that? Was that an outside force? But what was my responsibility in that? One of the things I tried to do just as a personal development factor over the last couple of years is really unpack the difference between a reaction and a response. Because I realized in having some self-reflection, I react to a lot more than I respond to. And I heard this great statement. It's like the difference between a reaction and a response is 5 seconds. So it's just taking that beat, and it's not having that initial reaction. It's thinking through that, saying, okay, I'm feeling a certain way right now. The world might tell me, oh, well, don't be angry, don't be sad, don't be upset. Our feelings aren't wrong. What we are held accountable to is the way that we respond to that. And that's something we really have an opportunity to work with our students. We were doing a session on trauma yesterday, and educator shared a lovely story about she had a very, very big hyperbole type response with a student. Every time something went wrong, he's flipping a desk. He's flipping a table. And so that's a reaction. He's feeling a certain way. And she now has the opportunity to walk through and say, okay, let's unpack that feeling and figure out what your response is going to be. But that it's going to involve self-awareness for that student. That's going to involve some really tough work and some self-reflection there. So that impacts then motivation, lifelong learning, and that ability to self-reflect. And then here we got adaptability, which is kind of the glue that holds all this together. And that includes things like flexibility, your feedback response. How well do your students take feedback? Do they love it? They love it in the, that's just the pencil to paper form. Hey, you didn't pass that test. Does that feel good? Do they love it when you come alongside them and you give them feedback that they don't want to hear? Most people don't like feedback, right? Again, because it goes back to I've got to figure out what part of this I own. And we've unpacked together a lot of different ways to have that feedback response and finding that balance between that empathy, that level of relationship that we have with our students, but not sacrificing the accountability that comes with that. There's a researcher that I love to follow, and he said, those that work with students need to have a velvet covered brick philosophy. And I love that because we've all heard like tough love. Okay, well, I have tough love for my students. But oftentimes we need to flip that. And he would say it means loving tough. So it's that velvet covered brick analogy is I need to build a relationship with you. I need to build currency. I need to build those interactions that we have that show you that I care about you so I can sit down and have those hard conversations so that I can communicate to you. No, 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 I'm not giving you what you perceive as negative feedback because I don't like you or I don't think you can do it. In fact, it's the opposite. Because I care about you and because I know you can do hard things, because I know you have an ability to change, then we're going to have this conversation. And so many people just skip to the top, like, well, I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to, it's tough love. And we got to find that balance there. We got to find that balance between that empathy and accountability. And that's a hard balance to strike because students need it in different ways. All right, so how then do we empower our adult learners? These are just some overarching things. Integrating academic and job-related skills. It's that when we talk about contextualizing instruction, it's that linking life with learning. Learning what your students' goals are, learning what your students want to do, what they're interested in and outside the classroom from a social standpoint. If you know that you have a student that loves to play soccer, and you're doing a geometry lesson and you're able to draw out some of those angles, make a soccer analogy. If you don't know a soccer analogy, go figure it out. It'll take you 2 seconds. That's what AI can do for you. Hey, I'm teaching slope and line and I have a student that likes soccer. Tell me how to link life and learning with this and it'll give you an idea right out. I mean, imagine that. I'm a firm believer that doesn't take away from your craft. It's helping you work smarter, not harder, because you could spend hours online trying to find out something like that and you could do it. Or you can do it in 2 seconds and then you can spend the rest of your time figuring out how you're going to build a relationship with that student in using that contextualization. Leveraging opportunities both with direct instruction. Some of these skills are just going to have to be direct instruction. Test prep skills, direct instruction. Critical thinking skills and along with that test prep, direct instruction. Note taking in multiple forms. So you're hitting all those learning styles, direct instruction. But a lot of it is going to be interwoven. A lot of it is going to be you pointing things out to your students as you're working through. And speaking of pointing things out, as this young lady has already said, in raising your son and realizing, hey, there have been some hard things, there have been some challenges. That's what's honed him into having some of these amazing life skills. Our students, although they left that traditional environment and they are lacking content skills, just because those skills don't fall into those categories, school-based, organization, time management, does not mean that those skills do not exist in that student. It's quite the opposite. They just don't know to call them that. I had a student that she was in a beautiful situation with her employer, and the employer who she'd been working with since she was 15. It was like her first job in high school, and then she left the traditional environment. She continued working with this organization. They loved her. They wanted to invest in her. So they said, hey, we've got this opportunity for this management program that's coming up, but you need to have your high school equivalency to do that, to enter the program. But we want to come alongside you and help you. They gave her extra time to study on her breaks. They gave her a little pay bump every time she would pass one of the subject exams. When I say it's a dream scenario for a student, it's a dream scenario for a student. But she got all the way to the end. She had one last test to pass. Guess which one it was? Math. Yeah. 80% of the folks, this is a GED stat, 80% of the folks who have one test left to take it's math. So her math was last. She knocks it out of the park. And we'd been working together for over the course of about 8 to 9 months at this point. And she calls me and she says, my interview's tomorrow and I don't know what I'm going to talk about because all I've been doing is studying. And I said, okay, well, let's unpack what you do when you study. You've got organization, you've got all of these things. And I said, but that's just that's a tip of the iceberg answer for you. Because what I didn't tell you about this young lady is she has a special needs child that she got into a school, but it's 45 minutes away from her home. She's caring for her elderly mother. And every morning she has to change over to the daytime caregiver that comes in. So her day starts at about 5:30, where that daytime caregiver comes in. She gets her mother settled. She drives 45 minutes to take her son to get the specialized training that he needs. She drives an hour and a half because her job just happens to be 45 minutes in the other direction. She drives an hour and a half back. She puts in her time where apparently she's a good employee because she's got folks coming alongside her. She's studying on her lunch break, and then she's doing everything in reverse in the evening. And then in the evening, she's the caregiver into wee hours of the night. And I said, you have incredible time management skills. You have incredible organizational skills. You have incredible problem solving skills to get up in the morning and make it to the end of the day. You just haven't yet applied them in all areas, but you have all these things that you can talk about. So I think it's a really important thing that we can do to empower our students, that you have these skills. You may just not have applied them to an academic environment. So let's talk about what that looks like. So we're going to talk about classroom skills. And AJ, I'm just talking and talking. Is there anything going on online or anything you would like to share from the recesses of your soul?
I hate to walk all the way across the room to just go yes, but nothing happening online necessarily. Talking, a few people mentioned in giving feedback, making sure that it's kind of sandwiched in positivity, right? So making sure the feedback that we're giving is encouraging or at least pointing towards, helpfulness with our students. And that was a few slides ago. But everything you're talking about, these really kind of transferable skills, which we usually think about in the workplace. But your point, what all these adult ed students do to manage their household and manage their life, helping them learn to apply those in an academic context. And so on Sunday, you did a 3-hour workshop, and I had about a 15-minute conversation in that workshop with folks from South Carolina who said, if my students only knew, if they could only see that they're already doing this, they come in with the walls and the barriers of I can't access the academic side of what you're trying to teach me because I just don't know how to do that. I've not been successful there. And he's like, if only you knew that you already have those skills, just apply them here. So yeah, I'm very excited to see like what are the techniques to get students to take that and start putting it in the classroom. Yes, Carol.
How many of you, when you're teaching math and it's a multi-step process, your student says, I understand it when I watch you do it. I just can't do it by myself. Is that everybody? You know what I think's responsible for that? GPS. The younger generation that learned to drive has never had to take out a map. Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. But even with MapQuest, you still had to look at your overall route. You had to understand the process that you were going to take to get where you were going. Our students don't do that. They follow GPS. You can drive someplace 20 times or more following GPS and still have no idea how to get there if your phone doesn't work. It transfers. It really does. Math, essay writing. So when my students start telling me that, I said, you know what? That's the GPS in your head. You really have to take a step back and understand this process that you're following. Once you understand how the process works, you don't have to memorize the steps. You don't need me sitting here saying, turn right, turn left, go forward. It's GPS is one piece of technology that I think has really reduced our problem solving skills as a whole.
And I think that's a great analogy for why industry is still wanting these very human, these personal skills. Because I have driven in the car with my daughter. She's following GPS, and we start to drive a car down a boat ramp. And she's continuing. I'm like, what are you doing? That's what it's telling me to do. And I'm like, does this seem logical to you that we are driving down a boat ramp right now? By the way, she has aspirations to work for NASA, and she is lovely and wonderful and so smart when it comes to things like quantum physics and all of these things. Logistical skills are not her strong suit. So we're having to work on that a little bit. But that's what it's telling me to do. I'm doing what you told me to do, and it's not working. And so that's a great analogy, because I do think our students feel frustrated by that. And so it's in those moments, okay, if what I'm telling you to do isn't working, then let's figure out what works for you. And then that does a couple of things. You're teaching them there's more than one way to solve a problem, and we're going to add some creativity in that. And you're learning as an educator. One of the favorite things I love to do is see that thought process when we're teaching, and we share with our students, hey, when I attack this problem, this is what I do, and this is what I'm thinking about in my head, and this is, the picture I draw or the thing that I see. What do you see? And when you've got the relationship with that student where they can openly share their thought process with you, that is observational data gold, because you're seeing where things connect in one particular area, but then you can help them apply that in another area. And it's the same thing with some of these skills. So how can we build those communication skills? Well, we can capitalize on the things that we are doing in class discussions, opening that up, having that civil discourse, letting them know that you have ground rules in your classroom for how we are going to communicate with each other, how we're not going to communicate with each other, and model that. Model that. Heaven forbid, if you have a different opinion than I do, I don't have to get angry and go and run off. I don't have to then, because what are we used to doing? Is we're all social media ninjas, right? We can just write these anonymous comments and not have to have that back and forth. And with that, we become slaves to our algorithm, and our algorithms are now telling us what our truth is. Because if you search certain things in order, if you look for certain things, your algorithm is only going to give you that truth after a while. It's fascinating. We have a colleague that lives in Seattle, and she and I were testing some things with our algorithm one time. We went to the exact same search engine at the exact same time live. We typed the same thing in our search bar. I live in the South. She lives in the Pacific Northwest. Very different political climates, cultures. We are very different people. We're involved in different activities. In that search bar, we typed exactly the same thing, and our top 10 were completely different sources based on our algorithm. And if we don't explore that in the classroom, then we're missing out on those opportunities with our students. Essay prep can do this. The argumentative essay is set to have that understanding of different points of view, and then figuring out what a strong argument looks like, figuring out what truth looks like, and then figuring out what your opinion is in that. So any kind of classroom correspondence, what we were talking about in the back with the person that shows up late all the time, that's an opportunity for you to build that communication skill with them, to go and have that opportunity to talk to them about why, that velvet covered brick moment. Hey, because I care about you, I don't want you to miss things in class, and this is why it's important to show up on time and be responsible, and teach them that type of feedback doesn't have to be a bad conversation, that it's just normal communication within that. And then in life, daily interactions, we're building communication skills, dispute management. Anybody had to call customer service lately and try to figure something out? Any kind of volunteer activities that lead into leadership activities. And then, of course, our students, and this falls into us as well, we're building great communication with our family responsibilities and making all those things come together. So as a part of our time together and some things that we've worked on, both with PLC and groups of students over the last few years, we've kind of put some scenarios into play, different things that students have shared with us, or different things that teachers have shared with us that they have walked their students through to figure out where they have all these existing skills. They just don't know what to call it, and they just don't know how to apply it there. So we love to do these tell me about a time when. So somebody says, well, I don't have great communication skills. Okay, well, You probably have them, you just don't know. Carol, tell me about a time when you had to use a communication skill. And so these are some things that after students are starting to get, oh, maybe I do have that skill. Maybe I do understand that. Allowing them to then explain that to their peers can be a very powerful thing. So we hear things like this. I recently received a bill that included extra charges that were not mine. When I contacted the customer service, the representative had many frustrating questions. After the call, I had to follow up with an email outlining my problems and needs. I had to use good communication skills to get my thoughts across without emotion to solve the issue. That's communication skills. It's not an academic environment, but that's communication skills. My teacher asked me to write a short list of supports for my essay's main idea. He asked me to only think of relevant statements to back up my position. I learned that sometimes good communication means saying less. Yeah, I think that's why we have that pop culture phrase now, say less. Yeah, if AJ's telling me, and I agree with him, say less, because sometimes communication means saying less. So I encourage you in all of these areas to try to cultivate that in your students. Hey, let's talk about a time when maybe you had great communication skills, and then how you can apply that. Same thing with problem solving, and I know we need to go kind of quickly now. Problem solving skill builders in the classroom. Test prep is a great vehicle to teach a student how to problem solve, because it's those critical thinking skills, especially if you're preparing for the high school equivalency exam. Setting schedules is an amazing exercise to figure out how to problem solve. And this is I think this is an eye-opening, empathetic exercise for you to do as well. I've done an exercise with students where I kind of print a blank calendar for the week, and it starts, as early as, you could put all 24 hours on there, because some of our students work crazy work schedules, different things like that. And so if we're talking, and they say, I just don't have any time in my day. Okay, well, let's figure out what that looks like. So I give them, and we use this priority matrix, like what are the things that you must do? What are the things that you should do? What are the things that you can do later? And what are the things that you like to do? So I'll give them this grid, and I say, okay, the first thing you do, mark out all the things that are non-negotiables for you. Fill in your work schedule. If you have children and you have to get them to school, fill that time frame in here. When you see them start to map out that time, it is a very eye-opening thing for you and for them. For me, it's often oh my goodness, you really don't have a lot of time in your day. For our students, it can start to show things. So as they map out the things that they must do, the things that they should do, things they like to do, it's often their should and their like that they realize need to be flip-flopped a little bit. Because if you have a student that can be really honest, and I fall victim to this, if you have a student that says, well, by 9 o'clock I'm in bed, but if I'm being honest, I'm on TikTok for a couple of hours. Okay, then when you fill in that time, those are things that you like to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you say you don't have time, when we say, I don't have time to do that, we have to be introspective and think about that as well. Is this great statement? I don't like it because it outs me a lot of the times. Show me how you spend your time, and I'll show you what you really care about. And sometimes you don't know that until you see it in paper. And sometimes it's an opportunity, oftentimes, for you then to illuminate that with your student. Brittany was just talking about this yesterday. If you have commute time and you have online access, she's got students that say, yep, I'm riding that train 20 minutes a day, so I'm doing 2 lessons on essential education while I'm riding that train. So it's teaching them to squeeze that sponge of time and utilize that. But they have to problem solve that, and we may need to come alongside them to do that. So setting schedules, games, and brain breaks. I love this idea, again, of just looking at how students solve problems in general, and then helping them apply that process to an academic or a life setting. Because in life, they are troubleshooting. We are troubleshooting. We're all adult learners, so we all have work-life balance. We all need resources. The day that we stop asking for help, we stop taking accountability, and we stop seeking resources is the day that we stop growing. And I don't want to do that as an educator. I don't want to do that as a person. And I definitely don't want to instill that in my children or my students. So seeking resources and then advocating. Our students don't realize how much they are advocates and have had to be advocates for themselves. Many of our students, if you don't have that high school equivalency diploma, you're climbing a ladder that's missing some rungs. And as you're working up, you have to learn to be an advocate for yourself. It's what makes them pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I need help getting to this net. I'm advocating for myself because I'm worth it and I'm important. So in problem solving, I don't like taking tests. You never hear students say that, right? I don't like taking tests. I think the test makers are trying to trick me. My teacher taught me a few test taking strategies to help. Now I tell myself it's a game and I won't let them beat me. I tell students that all the time, especially if you got a sassy student that's a little, a little snarky. Yeah, they're just trying to trick me. All right, well, then beat them at their own game, empower them to do that. Juggling all of my responsibilities is hard. When my work hours changed, I had to adjust my schedule to keep up with my responsibilities. It took some creativity and sacrifices. How many things in life take those two things? They take creativity and they take those sacrifices. But I figured out a way to make it all work. Sometimes that's what problem solving is at its base. I figured out a way to make it all work and all come together. All right, we're going real quick. Digital literacy skill builders. That is another employability skill that also involves that problem solving mechanism that's up there. So in the classroom, digital learning tools, various assessment meetings, and that intentional infused instruction. In life, it's that life and work related demands that impact that digital literacy, and then exposure, adaptability, flexibility with new devices and operating systems. I switched back to a Mac from an HP last year, and 2 years ago I had made the switch from the Mac to the HP. It drives me nuts every time I do it, and I don't know why I do that to myself, but I do it. We all have those times where when we're faced with technical obstacles, we've got those make or break moments where, all right, this is going to hurt. I'm going to have to make this sacrifice, because what's the alternative? Well, I guess I just don't learn how to do it. I get stuck and I don't want to move forward. So in digital literacy, tell me about a time when you had to be digitally literate. You had to problem solve in a digital format. I text all the time and I spent hours on social media. I thought I understood computer basics. Turns out I was missing some fundamentals. Your younger students fall into this category. Oh, they're digital natives. They need to do all these things. Again, I've mentioned TikTok. I should get like a kickback from TikTok today. Just because you can TikTok doesn't mean you're doing everything that an employer wants you to do from a digital standpoint. So it turns out I was missing some fundamentals. I'm using Computer Essentials, brought to you by Essential Education, to build helpful skills for a new job. Just when I fully understood our point of sale system at work, the company changed the provider. I was frustrated that I had to learn a new system. Turns out a lot of things worked in the same way. Adaptability, flexibility. They just look different. Now I can add 2 operating systems to my resume. That's a positive outlook on that, isn't it? And we have to remind ourselves and our students of those things too. So, what about self awareness? And I'm just rattling things off and I'm forgetting that you're even standing there. What did you want to add, AJ? Or what do you want to add online? Okay. All right. We're all good. Thank you. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm not having it it's still very, very early. All right. So, those self awareness skills in the classroom, we can help our students build self awareness in things like study and test taking habits. They're the only ones that are going to know what's best for them. And we've got to drill down and help them figure that out. And that's going to take that self awareness with that. It's going to take them figuring out, are you a morning person? You obviously are going to be best studying in the morning because you get up, hot diggity dog, it's a new day, let's go. Those folks that aren't, that don't wake up until 4 o'clock, they're going to have to figure out. We talked about this somewhere yesterday, that prime time. Oh, Charlie and I were talking about that. Everybody's brain has a prime time, and it's figuring out when you should best do that. It takes that self awareness and thinking through that, as well as progress monitoring and then time to reflect. We as a society, we as teachers, we as a world in general don't take enough time to just sit and reflect on some things. So in life, self-awareness can look like a regular review. We used to do this with our kids when we were saying, hey, we've had a really busy week that didn't go very well, and we were griping at each other throughout the week and some things went awry. We'd come together and kind of have a family meeting on Sunday night. Okay, what went well this week? Well, this went well. What did not go well this week? And then figuring out, okay, well, if that didn't go well, what are we going to do going forward? And so having a weekly review, having a monthly review of those goals, of those habits is really important. So as we go through, we're looking at things, and I know we need to tie up our time together. I just encourage you, as you're working through all of these skills, ask your students to really, really think about a time. If you teach the skill directly, hey, this is what self-awareness is. Hey, this is what time management is. Have them think about a time when they had to apply this skill. Have them think about a time. And if they don't have one, ask them more questions about what they do throughout the day and help them articulate and find those skills. Oh, do we? Do we go over? Oh, okay, gotcha. Please.
Classroom, what does reflection look like? Do you have regular meetings with your students? Do you give them opportunities to see their data? If you're using a program like Essential Ed, do you give them some of the reports to say this is how you're doing? What does reflection look like, and what does progress monitoring look like?
So, okay, so we have career coach meetings and we do that after they take their first initial tape. And then every time they take another tape or there is a change, we sit down with our students and have a one-on-one career coach meeting. Okay, these were your goals when you came in. Are we still on track? Do we need to change these goals? And just reflect on where they're at and where they're headed.
Just thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you do goal setting with your students in your program?
And I also work at the same program and I'm an instructor. And along with that same thing, as they're working through the program, whatever program they're working on, I sit with them a lot, sometimes one on one, and we look at the things they're struggling with. And I ask them, okay, why did you come to this answer? Sometimes they'll work together in pairs, but why did you? And I want to know their thought process. Okay, so you pick this answer. Why you keep picking this answer? Why do you keep picking this answer? Because if I can figure out their process, their thought process, then maybe I can help them figure out why it's wrong. And so I think that's a big one as well. And so we are a smaller program, but a lot of times even in a big classroom, we can sit there and the other students can explain to them, hey, this is why this process is wrong. And so we will do that too as a classroom.
So we use CASAS, and so we're using the competency reports. We find that the students really want to know how they did and how they're doing, and it's not a secret, right? We want you to know what it is like health. You didn't do well in testing in health, so what can we do to fix that? But we're also now starting a couple weeks into once folks start the classes where our instructional supervisors are going to sit down or catch them as they come out of the classroom. You know, how you doing? How's it going? What can we do to make it better? Because I think when learners know that they're taking part in their own learning environment, it becomes theirs more because they're part of the process. And I think that's really important. So we're really focusing now on we're together in the program. We're really focusing now on interacting with the students. Isn't that what it's all about? Right? Let's not lose sight of that when we're doing all these other things we got to do. It's all about the student.
Oh, I was gonna let you move on. No, I was gonna let you move on. Something incredibly revolutionary for our program this year. So probably about 30% of our program is now remote with classes serving students that can't get in. We felt a huge disconnect with them. Like we have no idea what their goals are, even though we do it. We have no idea anything. So we shut down our program every 6 weeks and have advising meetings with those students for about a half hour. We get to go through what work they've done. That's a huge push of doing some outside work to speed up the process for them. We go through their goals again. So that's been really revolutionary in getting to know our students better, where we have the disconnect of devices compared to the students that physically come in that you feel like you're talking to all the time.
So a couple things to point out, and then we can get the show back on the road. What I just let's go. Um, I know. That's why I never make it in retention past retention 4. I'm like, we're just gonna camp out. Anyways, what I'm hearing so much, especially from you all in the back, is the self-discovery aspect of student learning. And I think we talk about sometimes with adults having a deeper layer of level of learning, and it's that self-discovery and having others explain it to them a little bit, you know, and kind of making this collaborative because I can get up and I can preach fractions all day, every day. No one's gonna enjoy it, but I can do it, right? But it's when they get it and they can kind of voice it back and they can do their own error analysis. And so one thing I was going to mention earlier on the problem solving slide, and this came up a little bit online, is that if you aren't using, for instance, with Essential Ed, if you're not using our practice test to do error analysis with your students, you're missing out on a really key instructional strategy. It's something that I talk about in my trainings on a regular basis, and I get so many, and this is how so it's something that I know, like, it's not just an AJ-ism or whatever. It's something that people go, oh yes, I do that. Why are you talking like it's novel idea? So what I'm talking about is if you have a student go into Essential Ed and they take a practice test, have them take a moment that day or the next day while it's still fresh in their brain, but they're not cooked, and go back and look at their answers. And I always told my students, what I want you to do is I want you to take your, we don't have to call them Cornell notes, but I want you to take notes for all the problems that you got wrong and explain to me, why did you answer it the way you did, right? And sometimes they say, because I did eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and that's the one I landed on. But more often than not, there's a little bit of a thought process there. And then in Essential Ed, there's a little box that says answer explanation, and they'll get a how the problem is supposed to be worked. And so, and then I say, please kind of put that in your own words. And you get varying degrees of, like, a couple words and to full, oh, now I get it, blah, blah, blah. The reason I'm encouraging you to do this with your students is because when they do that error analysis first, and then you meet with them afterwards and have them explain it to you, it's almost like getting a window into their brain, right? And so you all in the back were talking about getting to kind of see their problem solving and their critical thinking skills. Like, that doesn't happen when I'm up here working on the board. Does anybody have questions? No? Okay, let's keep going. I don't even make space for you to respond. That doesn't happen in that environment. And if it does happen, because I did make space, it happens for 2 of you and not the other 20. Right? So if I can make some space in my schedule to do that error analysis with them, I really do get that view into their brain where I can see, oh, you just put the puzzle together backwards. Like, you just missed this. Let's just flip it, and now you've unlocked something for them. You're helping them feel like the dopamine of success. Like, oh, I get it now. Math was always so hard. So I would just encourage you to do that. Whether you use Essential Ed's practice test or you're doing your own thing, just make space for error analysis and then conference with them afterwards. So that's what I was going to add.
We often talk about that because in particular, that exercise is a twofold win, because one of the things they may recognize is it may not even be that I'm struggling with that concept. It may be you look at a pattern in questions that you missed, and it's the same type of question that they missed. And so, okay, well, maybe it's not a content issue. Maybe it's not a skill-based issue. Maybe it's just those types of questions really throw you off. And so then you know that. Also, but our students rarely do that because they're just like, oh, I didn't hit the goal I wanted to hit. I didn't make 145, so I failed. Not hitting that mark and saying that you failed is hardly ever true, because we're all making progress. We're all doing those things. And so when you're monitoring that progress, that's that skill of resilience that you're building in your students, so that when you sit down with them and they say, well, I didn't hit that magic mark. Okay, but what did you do a month ago when you tested? Well, I was here. What were you a month before that? I was here. And then show them that linear progress. Also, those opportunities are really good for us because we should train ourselves to do the same thing. If we get our students' results back on a test, how often do we say, oh, well, X amount passed, X amount didn't pass, and we throw it in a drawer? We've got to make ourselves go through those paces because we may find patterns. If I discover that 60% of my class missed this question by answering B, that's some information I need to dig into, because that either is something in the way I'm presenting or not presenting the material. It could be something that's in the curriculum that's throwing them off. And so we have to have that self-awareness to work through some of those things too. And then we get to model that for our students to come back and say, hey, I was looking at y'all's test. It looks like you're struggling with this. Maybe you need something else from me. How can I better explain that? Those types of things. And then you have a vulnerability there with them. And the interesting thing about self-awareness is we don't like to do it because a lot of us, it makes us feel bad. But when we can embrace it, it's actually empowering because it's like, oh, now I don't have to be afraid of that anymore. Now I know what I can do to move forward. And so the more that we can ingrain that in our students is really important as well. All right, so let's jump into adaptability in these last few minutes together. So in the classroom, what does adaptability look like? How can we start building that with our students? Purposefully changing instruction styles, putting them through the paces of, you might have seen this way. I know that you are not comfortable when this happens, and that's fine. We're going to present it in a way that makes you comfortable, but I'm still going to make you do it this way too. So that they have to do those hard things, that we have to put them through those paces. Various assessment mediums. Sometimes a student is just not great at expressing themselves in writing, but they can talk about a concept all day long, or vice versa. Or they can, present what they know about something in one way, but not in another. And as AJ was saying, it's the same concept. If they can present what they understand in one way, and we see that, and we see the process that goes into them explaining what they've learned, then we can come alongside them and help them try to express what they've learned in a different way, because we know they're not going to get to choose that all the time, right? They're not always going to have, well, I don't want to write that. I'd just rather tell you instead of writing an essay. They're not always going to have that opportunity, but you can allow that flexibility in your classroom so that you can empower them by being able to express what they've learned and then figure out that thought process to help them adapt to a new medium. Of course, in work and life, they're going to have responsibility shifts. We all have responsibility shifts. We all have schedule changes, and we all have differing expectations of ourselves and differing expectations of our students. And one thing that we often encourage educators with is that we have to find this delicate balance of measuring expectation and belief. Because when we're helping our students set goals, sometimes if our students are very, very optimistic, especially if they really want to complete something fast, then they will say, my goal is to complete the GED by the end of the week. For some, that might work. If they're just, right there at the cusp on their practice test, 1 or 2 points away, that might work for some of them. But we have to help them set realistic goals. Now, setting realistic goals then doesn't mean taking that bar from, I want to finish the GED in a week, to I want to finish the GED in a year. Because maybe that goal is too low. Maybe that bar is too low. So we have to be in relationship with our students to marry that high expectation and high belief, because we can kind of drop the ball on both ends of that. We can have really, really high expectations. My daughter had a teacher that came in one time, and she was like, half the people don't pass this class. Good luck. Set this really, really high bar of how difficult something was going to be and how hard something was going to be. And I think probably somewhere in her brain, she was like, yeah, I'm just telling them I'm a tough teacher and I'm giving them what to expect. For many, many students, now, my daughter said, oh, yeah, basically the equivalent of hold my beer. Let me show you. Let me show you. That gets her riled up. But for many students, they're defeated before that even takes off. The opposite can happen, though, too. If you've got a student that's starting at a really, really low level and you tell them, but I just believe in you. I have all these, I believe that you can do it, but your expectation doesn't match that belief, then it gets those things out of balance. And so then all of a sudden their adaptability comes into freeze mode because they don't know where that belief or that level of expectation is coming from. We're a minute over. I know. Okay. Well, we will put one thing I do want to show y'all before we go. So we've got some resources here for you at the end. Over the last few years, we've done some work with World Ed and the Change Agent magazine. And one of the things that we have worked with them within is they put out, has anybody seen Change Agent magazine? Okay. Wonderful hidden gem of a resource. If you are a teacher and you have to buy it yourself, it's still an investment. It's $30 a year, and you get multiple iterations of this magazine written by students at multiple reading levels, written by adult educators at multiple reading levels. It's kind of a print version of Newsella from the standpoint of, yeah, if you've used it, I see the head shakers because it's just gold. They'll give you some exercises going in before you read this article written from a student's perspective. perspective. They will highlight vocabulary that might be new that you can teach that vocabulary. And then at the end, they give some follow-up exercises. And we did a series with them that was all about transferable skills. And one of the resources that came out of this was this little guy right here. And when you get the deck, we'll put it in the Hoover app. When you get the deck, this will link to it. This is a wonderful way to walk through and do some direct instruction with your students on what communication skills look like, what teamwork and collaboration looks like, and then have them physically work through that exercise of tell me a time when. And if they're struggling to find them, help them find them and help to build that confidence in there, because we know that our students have skills in all of these areas. They just may not have been able to have that opportunity to articulate them in a school-based environment. And so we have to empower them with that language. So that resource is here for you. Of course, we have tons of resources in both digital and in print formats. Please stop by the booth if you have not gotten some of this guy. Let's see. Yeah. I just need to go home. Things are not working for me today. I apologize. So these are some resources from us. We also invite you to all the online resources that we have. We have continuous professional development throughout every month. Every Tuesday, you get a free hour of professional development with us. Sometimes it's me and AJ. Sometimes it's me and Charlie. Sometimes it's Charlie and AJ and their whole team. So join us for those things. We want to equip you in order to help you equip your students. And I need some digital literacy skills right here as we go ahead. And then, of course, if you have not gotten this guide, jump into this guide, because the PLC did a much better job of articulating some of these skills and the ways to help articulate those and build those in your students. So thank you for bearing with me this morning. And we're glad that you came in. We hope that you all have safe travels home. Okay.